It may only be August and the middle of the preseason, but the Seahawks offensive line and run game looking to be in mid-season form as they wallop the Chiefs at Lumen Field. It's time for a Locked On Seahawks postgame. Let's rock and roll.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in on this late evening, early morning. For a lot of our fans that are listening, whether you're in Portland, Oregon, or listening across the country in Tampa, Florida, we appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks getting their first preseason win, their first W of 2025 in a battle against the Kansas City Chiefs tonight, 33-16. A game that didn't even feel that close, to be honest with you. It really felt from the outset like the Seahawks took control and the Chiefs never really in this game. And like any preseason game, the starters are not playing very much. You only can put so much stock in what you see. At the same time, how the Seahawks started this game, as Sam Darnold says afterwards, this is their style of football. The Seahawks came out and just pounded the rock between the tackles, zone concepts, gap concepts, you name it. Offensive line was moving dudes. Zach Charbonnet running wherever he wanted to go. First drive, they marched right down the field. Sam Darnold went 4 for 4 for 34 yards, and he was an afterthought because the run game is what really fueled the opening touchdown drive with the starters in the lineup. You got to see a catch from Jackson Smith and Jigba. You got to see Elijah Arroyo and Robbie Oots get their hands on the football in the passing game, but it was really about what the front line was doing to the Kansas City Chiefs. And the Chiefs played a blend of starters and backups on defense. It's not like this was all a second string unit. Obviously, Chris Jones was not out there, but there were plenty of starters, and the Seahawks held their own in the trenches. Gray Zabel with another really exciting effort up front, moving guys horizontally, vertically, you name it. He was putting guys on skates, and he was moving them. They were getting good blocks from Josh Jones. Jalen Sundell got to the second level, literally the first play of the game, and opened up a seam for a 13-yard run for Zach Charbonnet. Charbonnet had almost 50 rushing yards on that opening drive, and it was capped off with a 15-yard touchdown run that you could have drove maybe 1.5 semis through. The hole was so big. Josh Jones and Gray Zabel winning on their zone blocks and creating displacement both horizontally and vertically. And then you have Eric Salbert coming over on a split zone, whacks the end, kicks him out, huge hole. Nobody touches Charbonnet, 15-yard touchdown to put the Seahawks up 7-0, a lead that they never relinquished. They came out in the very next series. Zach Charbonnet's out of the lineup. Sam Darnold's out of the lineup. They've still got their starters in on the offensive line. They keep running the rock. Literally the first play from scrimmage, George Halani goes for 30 yards. Another play that you could have drove a pickup truck through the crease that was created on just a simple outside zone. Massive crease for George Halani before he got pushed out of bounds 30 yards later. And he had almost 50 rushing yards on 5 carries on that drive. Seattle just ran the rock, and they kept having success doing it. That drive ends with Drew Lock throwing a touchdown to Jake Bobo on a screen. And that was the only pass attempt they had the entire drive. Leading up to that point, it was all about the run game. And George Halani puts them up 14-0. Really didn't look back after that point. The Seahawks had almost 200 rushing yards in the first half of this game. They had 3 backs that had runs of 15 or more yards in the first half, as Damian Martinez had a 19-yarder on the third possession that Seattle marched all the way down to the 2-yard line, and unfortunately a 4th down incompletion. They weren't able to get any points going for it there, but still, the run game was dominant. The offensive line was dominant, and I know it's August. I know it's the preseason, but it's hard not to be excited about what you saw from the Seahawks run game and just how easy it made it on the quarterbacks. They were able to get their bootleg game going with play action with both Sam Darnold and Drew Lock. And those guys had massive pockets to work with as a result. That run game was doing exactly what it's supposed to do. When it's effective, it slows down the pass rush, and that's exactly what we saw tonight. For the game, the Seahawks rushed for 268 yards. They were over 270 before the final run got stuffed for a couple-yard loss, but 268 rushing yards. They had no turnovers, held the football for more than 38 and a half minutes, and their biggest lead was 23 points. And this is a team that is trying to discover their identity. They're still in the early stages of doing that, but the fact that they could go out and run the ball the way they did, I joked about this to an extent. It was a joke on social media in the first half, but it almost felt like I was watching a college football video game in terms of the way that the run game looked for the Seahawks, just ripping off all these big chunk plays, starting with that offensive line and Gray Zabel and company, getting the job done, creating those massive holes for the running backs to work with. Jacardia Wright added a 18-yard run in the third quarter, so you ended up having 4 running backs in this game that finished with more than 15 yards on at least one carry that they had in this game. That's just impressive in terms of the depth and the way the offensive line was playing. And I want to give a shout out to the defense real quick, because that's kind of going to be an afterthought coming out of this preseason game. And it's understandable. When you run for almost 270 rushing yards, that is going to be the headline when you score touchdowns on your first 2 drives, in a large part because of that run game. That is going to be the headline. The Seahawks scored a lot of points tonight. But let's give the defense some credit. I mean, Kansas City was able to march down to the 24-yard line, actually got into the red zone, and then Julian Love in a preseason game comes up and stuffs fullback Carson Steele on 4th and inches and stops him from getting past the yard to gain. Kansas City gets held to no points. 6 of their last 7 drives, the Chiefs had 9 or fewer total yards. 9 or fewer. That is not a typo. They had a safety on one of those coming from Brandon Peely, and they had a couple of punts that they forced. They had an end of half possession where Kansas City just kind of said, we just want to go into halftime. We're not running any more plays. It was a fantastic effort up and down the depth chart. Your rookies, your undrafted guys coming in, your journeymen that were playing a lot of snaps in the second half. They were flying all over the football. The tackling was really good. And yes, you're playing against backups, but it still is impressive when you don't get to have many opportunities to tackle, or there's really no live tackling on the practice field. For them to come out and do what they are doing on the defensive side of the football, I think is really impressive for the preseason. Even seeing them go out and get the job done, holding the Chiefs to under 160 total yards of offense in this game. I know Patrick Mahomes didn't play. I know a number of starters didn't, but Kansas City had a guy that has started a lot of games in the league in Gardner Minshew that started this game. He started a lot of games in the league. Former Washington State star. They had most of their starters playing with him for at least the first series. I thought that it was a pretty impressive effort by the defense. It's going to get overlooked just because of how dominant the run game was. That clearly was the story coming out of this game, as it should have been. But don't overlook Mike McDonald's defense and just the depth they have on that side of the ball, the way the young guys are rising up, and that unit is playing as a unit. Whether it's the first stringers, the second stringers, third stringers, fourth stringers, whoever's out there, they are playing as a unit. And you can just see those young guys are feeding off what the veterans are doing and setting the example for them. So a dominant effort. The score is going to show that it was fairly lopsided. Again, though, I think 33-16 does not do the game justice. I felt Seattle was even more dominant than that score would say. A late punt return made it a little bit closer. But this really was a one-sided, lopsided affair that was set in the trenches. That's where the Seahawks won this football game, particularly the offensive side of the ball, with the way that they were bullying the Chiefs up front, getting big chunks of running yards, and just honestly, the opportunity for these backs not even to get touched till they were past the line of scrimmage. And just, you don't see that a lot of the NFL, even in preseason games. To see that happen, it's incredibly encouraging. There's a lot for this team to work on. It is just preseason. You don't want to get too high on what happens in these games. And at the same time, I think that you have to be encouraged with what Clint Kubiak's offense looks like at this stage here in mid-August. The Seahawks getting their first preseason win. When I come back, as always, it's time for game balls. And I actually had some really tough decisions to make on this front on offense, defense, and special teams. I'll be getting to those game balls coming up next year on our post-game edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back, so fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, Rob, Nick, and I are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. I've used Yahoo Fantasy for years and love how smooth the draft day experience is. Our Locked On League's been running through Yahoo for a while now. Easy setup, great mobile app, and the smack talk just hits different in the message boards, especially when I'm rubbing victory in Rob or Nick's face. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues. This is an exciting new way to play fantasy football where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's only one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together, and you can give this new mode a try. Or if you're more into the classics, you can still play head-to-head, private leagues, or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football right now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Welcome back to the post-game edition of Locked On Seahawks. It's your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks getting in the win column for the first time this preseason. A dominant 33-16 win over the Kansas City Chiefs at Lumen Field. Almost 270 rushing yards to spearhead the offense. The defense was fantastic, forcing a bunch of punts, getting a safety. It was a dominant effort on both sides of the football. Let's get to our game balls now, as we do each and every weekend. And I'll admit, on offense, all the talk that I've had here so far about the run game, it would be easy to just give game balls to all of the offensive linemen or to all the running backs. You easily could have done that in this game with the way that the tone was set by the run game. And yet I'm going to pivot and go a different direction, because with game balls, to me, it's about individual performances that really stand out. And so I want to go to the passing game with the player that scored 2 of Seattle's touchdowns through the air today, that being Jake Bobo. Got to give him the offensive game ball. And the first touchdown, which was the second drive of the game, as I mentioned earlier, Seattle had literally ran the ball pretty much every play down the field till they got to the 12-yard line. And then Drew Lock throws a screen in the slot to Jake Bobo. And I even asked Bobo about this after the game. You could tell by his reaction, he kind of gave a hesitation step when he first caught the ball, because I figure he was expecting, and he kind of hinted at this was the case. He caught the ball, and then you turn, you expect there to be traffic, and all there was a parting of the seas, just nothing but green in front of him. And I think he was shocked by that. Like, where's the defense at? And that's what the run game does for you. It creates those type of creases, and it puts that kind of pressure on the defense. And so Bobo gets the ball, has that hesitation step, and then takes off and gets a 12-yard touchdown. As he said, just nothing but green in front of him. And then later in the half, he scored his second touchdown coming from Drew Lock, and it was a perfect throw from Drew Lock, but a really nice job on the fade route by Bobo, getting both feet down, tiptoeing along the sideline, and holding onto the football through the ground. 2 touchdowns in the half. And I want to give a special teams shout out to Jake Bobo as well. I know his teammates were laughing about it, his 5.6 yards per return average in college, and the fact that, you know, he's not known for his speed and he was out there returning punts. But the one punt return he had in this game was a 20-yard return. And I thought I agree with Mike McDonald. I thought he looked pretty darn good doing it. So I thought Jake Bobo just had a fantastic game. Got involved in the run game as a blocker too, but he had those 2 receiving touchdowns of different varieties, one in the screen and then the other one in the fade, which is more what you would expect from a 6'4" receiver, that you're going to try to take advantage of his height and let him win a contested catch, which he was able to do there in the end zone. But you get that punt return. I just thought Jake Bobo, if you had to give a game ball to just one player, he probably would be my winner, because I just thought number 19 had a fantastic effort. So he gets the offensive game ball. As for the defensive side, I'm actually going to give two. Normally, I try not to do co-game balls, but I'm going to give it to two guys that had outstanding play tonight that maybe are hovering under the radar, particularly one of them way under the radar. Brandon Peely is now in his second season with the Seahawks. He's played in some regular season games previously with the Miami Dolphins, and immediately after Drew Lock failed to get a fourth down and goal pass to Nick Callerup, one of their undrafted rookie tight ends, the ball falls incomplete. The Chiefs have the ball at the 2-yard line. They're back into the shadow of their goalpost, and in those situations, a lot of times defenses, they get aggressive because they're trying to go get the safety. The Seahawks pulled it off, and Brandon Peely made it happen with immediate penetration, gets into the backfield, devours the running back, and gets some help from Drake Thomas coming in from behind to make sure that that running back doesn't get the ball outside of the end zone. They get 2 points. So even though they didn't get a touchdown or a field goal on the previous offensive drive, that's where taking that risk, you can still get points potentially if your defense can make it happen. And Brandon Peely did that. I just think he has had a quietly productive training camp, and he's done some good things in the preseason, this being the most significant play for him, getting that safety. But I'm going to give him the first game ball, and let's give Seth Coleman some love. Undrafted rookie out of Illinois that actually got cut at one point in training camp, was not on the roster for 2 days, and then they brought him back. He goes out and has 1.5 sacks in this game. I'm still going to argue that it was probably 2 partial sacks. I thought that Jared Ivey had part of a sack on one of those. The scorekeepers did not agree with me on that, but nonetheless, a really active game for Seth Coleman, getting 1.5 sacks. He had an extra tackle for loss. He had the final tackle of the game. You got to see number 43, a player that played on a high-level Illinois defense. Has had a lot of good players come out of there, Devin Witherspoon just being one of them that was a former teammate. This guy's played a lot of snaps against Big Ten teams, and he's taking advantage of the reps that he's getting, and he's given them a little bit different style player working off the edge. So give him the game ball as well. Really got after it in the pass rushing department. Thought that was an impressive performance for him in the second half. So he and Brandon Peely get the game balls. And then on special teams, this might seem like I'm going with the low-hanging fruit here, but Jason Myers kicking in the elements. I know that you are a Seattle kicker. The expectation is you're going to be making kicks in the rain, but it was coming down on those extra points. It was coming down on the field goal that he made in this game. And he's got a different long snapper that he's working with that can change the game for your entire kicking mechanism. And yet he got the job done there. And the Seahawks could have given up a kick return for a touchdown in this game if not for Jason Myers managing to tackle the ball carrier. This could have been very easily a game where we're talking about the special teams unit giving up a punt and kick return touchdown. But Jason Myers prevented that from happening. So kudos to him. Didn't just make his kicks, but also potentially took some points off the board on special teams, making a tackle on kickoff coverage. So Jason Myers gets the game ball there on special teams, with the honorable mention going to Jake Bobo, but I gave him offense. We're not going to give him 2 game balls for that effort on the punt return for the Seahawks in the second half. Up next, continuing my post-game coverage here of the Seahawks win over the Chiefs in the second preseason game, it's time for 3 up, 3 down. Stock watch. Which players are hot coming out of this game and which select few maybe aren't feeling as good coming out of this win over the Chiefs. That'll be coming up next here on our post-game edition of Locked On Seahawks. Welcome back to the post-game edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there listening in, the diehards here post-game. With these late games, the show always ends up coming on late. So my apologies. That's just the way that it goes when there's a 7 p.m. Pacific time start. Nonetheless, Seahawk fans are going to love hearing about this game because it was a dominant preseason victory, 33-16 over the Chiefs. Well worth the wait to discuss this victory in rapid fire. Let's get to our 3 up, 3 down as we do every post-game show. The players that are hot coming out of this game that really helped themselves or just had great efforts, and the players that maybe are going to be looking back and saying, I wish I could have taken a little better advantage of that. Let's start on the offensive side of the football in terms of 3 up. And to me, Drew Lock has got to be the first one that we are mentioning here. And in fact, all of my players that I'm going to be mentioning here on Stock Watch for Who's Hot, I'm going all offensive guys because the offense really set the tone here. Drew Lock only had 2 incompletions in the entire game, and he played into the early part of the second half. He was wheeling and dealing. He was making smart decisions. He didn't have the ball get away from him like he did a couple times against the Raiders. No turnovers, had a 30-yard run on a scramble to go with his 2 touchdowns to Jake Bobo. I thought that it was a really efficient, productive game for Drew Lock. One of the better games I've seen him play, whether it's preseason or regular season. And the run game certainly helped him, but you got to see the athleticism on the scramble, the rollouts, the bootleg action, and he was very accurate. Aside from that one throw on 4th down, and that was not going to probably be completed anyway. It was great defense, and there just wasn't really anywhere to go with the football. I thought that he did a great job of getting the football out in a timely manner, accurately, and with anticipation, getting the ball to his receivers. So Drew Lock gets the first nod. And then I'm just going running backs in general because I didn't give a game ball to Zach Charbonnet or George Halani. Damian Martinez looked much better tonight than we saw in the first preseason game. Found the end zone for a touchdown. Also had a 19-yard run in the first half. So we saw some explosives from him, something that just wasn't there last week. He looked much more decisive and just faster tonight, quite frankly. So you got to see that. And then Jacardio Wright maybe had the most impressive run of the entire night. It looked like he was down just a couple yards into the run, but his knee didn't go down and he rolled over the top of a defender, maintained his balance, and turned it into an 18-yard gain that nearly ended up being a lot more if he could have kept his feet along the sidelines, might have had a chance to take it to the house. But nonetheless, it was an impressive run, and that made it. They had 4 backs that had 15-plus yard runs in this game. A testament to what the offensive line was doing, but also the depth the Seahawks have in the backfield. And all 4 of the backs that I just mentioned there had monster games, were playing really well, benefiting from that offensive line. So kudos to the Seahawks, even without Kenny McIntosh, the depth that they have still got there. And there might be some really hard decisions coming with what Jacardio Wright's doing now that Damian Martinez had a better game and what George Halani continues to do. You've got some interesting conversations there on the depth chart for the Seahawks at running back. And last but not least, Derek Young, he's been a popular player for us to talk about on this show throughout training camp because he has been making big plays every single day. And something that was a struggle for him earlier in his career is when you did see those flashes on the practice field, it didn't seem to translate into game action. That is no longer the case. He has been really good in both these preseason games. 3 catches for 52 yards. All 3 of them went for first downs. And he had some really nice routes that he ran in this game where his breaks and setting up his breaks that he put the defender into a position of conflict and then was able to spring out of his breaks and be wide open. Quarterback's hitting him right in stride. Drew Lock and him seem to have a really good rapport going at this point. I think Derek Young is on this roster. The question is, how does that impact somebody like, say, a Marquez Valdez-Scantling? Does that make it that maybe he's not on the roster? Who knows what's going to happen on that front? But Derek Young, with his kick returning ability as well, he had a 29-yard kick return in this game. You add in the fact that he is contributing in offense. He's already a great gunner on special teams. Derek Young is doing everything right now, and he had a fantastic performance tonight. So, to me, he is on this roster. I think he's on the 53, and he might have a chance to do a lot more than just special teams in regular season games. We may see him have a small role on this offense because of what he can do blocking, how physical he is, creating after the catch, and just his improvements. He's a guy that can win downfield with his speed. His general improvements as a receiver, he's got a chance to contribute some for the Seahawks on the offensive side of the football. Flipping the script now, in a game like this, when you win 33-16, there's always things that you need to work on even in the preseason. So there's going to be players on the wrong side of the bubble here. But I want to start with a player who I don't know if he's in trouble or not. We will find that out here when roster cuts arrive. But Bryce Cabledew was getting the second team reps with the offense at left guard today, not Seattle Lamea, and Cabledew left with his left arm banged up, but he ended up returning to the game. So they ended up dodging a bullet there. But Seattle Lamea came in when Cabledew got banged up and promptly got busted for a holding penalty. Maybe could have had a second one. They called it on the defense, but watching the replay looked to me like it easily could have been an offensive holding penalty. And I'm kind of wondering where the defensive part of it came from. But he has really had a struggle in training camp in the preseason, and that's why he's repping with the third-team offense. He has not been able to build off those games that we saw last year for whatever reason. He has taken a step back this training camp and this preseason so far. And if Bryce Cabledew is getting reps in front of him, it's making me wonder, is he not just on the bubble? Is he truly on the hot seat now to make this football team? And the penalties, the lunging, in his blocks, I just have not seen the same player that had potential, showed upside last year. For whatever reason, it just isn't coming together right now for him. And I'm wondering if that means that he could be on the outside looking in terms of making this 53-man roster. Number 2 on my list here as far as who's not hot coming out of this game, the punt coverage, and really you could argue just kick and punt coverage in general, because as I mentioned earlier, Jason Myers, if not for his heroics, knocking down a kick returner, this conversation could be talking about giving up 2 special teams touchdowns. They gave up the punt coverage touchdown to Sky Moore in the fourth quarter when the game already had been decided, but that is still going to be a play that coordinator Jay Harbaugh is not going to be pleased about at all. Not taking good angles, missing the chance to be able to make tackles along the sideline and push him out of bounds. They've got to do a better job in general with going down their pathways, making the right angles. Defensively, the pursuit angles look great right now. It is not that way with special teams. They are going to have to get after it and figure out how they can clean this up. At that stage of the game, you did have some backups who were playing. It wasn't the guys that are going to be playing in kick and punt coverage when you get to the regular season, most likely. But still, that is going to be an area they've got to attack because they had issues with that for a large portion of last season. So the punt coverage, the kick coverage, those are areas the Seahawks have to continue to attack that look like they still may be a bit problematic going into the 2025 season. And my last one here, let's have some fun with this. Brady Russell's shoes. Brady Russell, everybody was poking fun after him after the game except Jake Bobo saying I'm the one guy that can't make fun of him for this happening. But he caught a slant from Jalen Milroe that if he keeps his feet, I think he's got a real good chance to score, to get a touchdown. Instead, 17 yards, he gets tripped up by the turf monster and just falls to the ground. And he's not the first that's had that happen, losing your feet when you got a big play. We saw George Fant all those years ago when he was playing as a tight end that caught a ball, former basketball player, and had the first down only to trip himself up. We could forgive him as an offensive lineman. Brady Russell, you're an athletic fullback tight end, special teams guy, ought to be able to keep your feet. And his teammates were having a lot of fun with that. Unfortunately, didn't get the touchdown there, but nonetheless, that was a really impressive catch and run up until he ended up having that issue, losing his footing. And so guys are going to be giving him some flack about that for a little while, and then they will move on. Who knows? Maybe a long while. That's a place sometimes they can stick in terms of inside jokes. But Brady Russell might want to get his cleats checked and make sure that next time he is ready to go so he avoids this happening a second time if he gets the football in his hands with a chance to score. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. We'll be back on Monday with some in-depth takeaways after reviewing the film, what stood out from the Seahawks win against the Kansas City Chiefs, maybe some topics that we didn't cover on this post game. Once you see the film, there's always things that jump out that maybe you didn't notice in initial watch. So we'll be diving into our Monday musings. That'll be coming up on Monday's episode. Make sure that you listen in and enjoy your weekend. Go Hawks.